Ooh. Susan Landy made a comment, go teach a European class we can all go to. I'm like, oh, that sounds amazing.
Ooh.
I've always wanted to do something like that. Like that's literally one of my dreams is to um, do one of those things where you like rent a villa or something and everyone goes together and paints for a week. Um, and then like you do like a field trip into a museum. I really want to do
That
that.
would
And then I
be
was always
perfect.
thinking like, if I could just make that kind of a trip, like pay for my whole family to be able to go. And then we stay for another week after the class and do like the family tourist thing. But how much fun it would be.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, to get a chance to.
it would be like, I like the idea of the ones where you go and you actually just stay in a spot and paint around the villa. Um, so that it's not as, not so much like rolling around doing, going from place to place, but like you kind of land in a spot and there's someone who like does the meals, like this, I have this whole fantasy of like all these al fresco dinners, like where, it's good times. That's a
Yeah.
dream. I mean, the world will open up again at a certain point and we'll be able to do it.
I
Um,
feel
and by that time my kids will be, because I was kind of waiting to try to go for that dream until my kids were old enough that it would still be fun to take them, because when it was a lot of diapers it just
mhm,
felt like trying to take kids in diapers to
mhm.
Europe felt like maybe that would not
Yeah.
it
That's a little too challenging.
it really felt like it was gonna be a big challenge, especially because I was talking about like, well, I'll come and I'll just teach for the first week, and then I was pitching it to my husband like, and you will just hang out with the kids for the first week and then the second week we'll all do family stuff. And he was like, oh, like when they were babies and it was all diapers and strollers, he was like, I don't think I want to like go to a foreign country and manage all this by myself.
He's like, yeah,
Do I want to spend
maybe
my
not.
vacation doing that, or do I want to? It's pretty funny. Okay, so let me share my screen again. This is, it's funny because you were very self-disparaging in your email about it, but I think this is fantastic. This is almost exactly what I was talking about when I was giving the assignment. Like how when you first kind of really grapple with foliage and trying to carve the forms, right? That your
Mhm.
first attempt will feel like clay, they'll feel overly solid, but they kind of have to, like, so that you can see them and you're actually like making, the solid forms. And then the next step is really just to do like, 10 more of these, until you really start to get that much more comfortable with the designing and organizing of the shapes, and then from there, you go in and start texturizing. It's a lot then about just softening certain edges and
Mhm.
controlling contrast. So what you have in terms of values, I love it that you did like the black and white version, like showing the black and whites, because you can really see how his setup, this is Dan Schultz's painting, his setup is very like the big dark mass up against the sky, which is
Yeah.
something that Carlson talks about in his landscape book. He has this whole scheme of like what plane the topography of the landscape is, and then what that means for its value relationship. So like when things go up against the sky like this, they go dark, and then the ground plane being lighter, and then the dome of the sky being the lightest thing. It's a really interesting organizing principle, but we definitely didn't have time to go into all of that today. But this Dan Schultz painting is a really classic example of it. So what you were doing then, while you were grappling with making three values in the trees, was when you look into it, all of a sudden the contrast does seem much higher. And
Mhm.
and to make it easier for yourself to see things, you make it higher, so that you can
Yeah.
see the difference between your own paintings. And that's why that repetition, like just do a bunch of these studies, because then you slowly get a little bit more comfortable working in these ultimately very close value ranges, right? So let's
Yeah.
zoom.
It's kind of funny. I picked his painting and I looked at a lot of them. I thought, oh, this will be easy. He's already done the painting.
Yeah, I know, right?
And then it's like,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, maybe I should have just worked off one of my photographs. Then no one would know how I'm butchering it, you know?
It's like, what is easy? You know what I mean? Every time I have ever said to myself, this, I'm going to do this because it's easy and I can, it has, I've always like been humbled. You know, like,
Yeah.
I remember I did this painting in my laundry room. Again, like when my kids were really little, and I was like, okay, I've got to paint a big painting for my galleries. I'm going to set up something really easy. And I set up a bunch of folded towels sitting on the laundry room. I was like, this is great. It's just like a block study, you know, it's just towels. And I start to try to draw it and paint it. And I mean, it was such a hot mess. I couldn't believe it. And I literally ended up like on the floor crying in that moment of despair going, I guess it's over. I guess I'm not really a painter after all, because I can't even paint this simple, ridiculous thing that I should be able to do. And I, you know, that whole narrative, right? Like was going.
Yeah.
And then about a year ago, we were getting ready to move like to this house and I find that painting. And it was a start. I never finished it. I only started it. And I'm looking at it and I was like, there is nothing wrong with this start. Why was I so hard on myself? Like, as I looked at it years later, like 10 years later, like,
Yeah.
and all of a sudden I had fresh eyes and I was like, why? You know, it's like, there's sometimes you literally can't even see for yourself what you're doing, but you have some beautiful rhythmic relationships. You have strong concepts in here, but you're like comparing yourself, you know, to this painting and someone who's been painting this particular way and developed his own language and everything. So you don't want to give yourself too much of an unfair comparison to him. You instead compare, you know, your own learning experience. I actually really love this one right here. This is really cool. Look at that. That has so much dimension to me. But again, like he is working in some very tight values here. Let's see how tight they are. I'm gonna like color pick them here. So let's show, that's where this one is. So you can see it on the picker right there.
Mm-hmm.
And then we're gonna go into the blues, very close from there to there. And then we'll go here and look at how more removed it is. Yeah. But when we go into this dark here, you see how low it is? And then we go into this blue and you see it moving up. But even there, I mean, those are some tight value shifts. There now I'm in the half tone. Now I'm in the light. Now I'm in the dark. So the half tone to the dark, very tiny shift. Like the colors are shifting, but the value is barely moving. So that said, then, like if you were going to do another study like this, you kind of choose your contrast when you're organizing your thoughts as well. Although I don't think there's anything wrong with showing it to yourself with all kinds of clarity like this. And then with your next layer, you push everything into its contrast category. So you would then kind of literally, I think you would just take like a blue, like you mix a blue up, like a grayed out kind of blue, like what this is. And then you layer it right on top of these rich darks that you've got. And then you go in and you find a darker version of this. Because with these lights, it's all about comparing this light to this light, you know, and comparing their relative, you know, value to one another, because all of the lights don't get to be the equal amount of lightness. So you really successfully made this lighter up top. And then, so really you could probably just go into this painting and lighten the dark and darken the light in this mass, keeping your exact shape and tension that you have right now, and watch it fall into place. That might be a really cool exercise to do.
Yeah.
Like to actually go back into it and force the values to compress together a little bit in this whole scenario, and then just see what it does.
I like the way he painted the tree to the sky, that and
Yeah.
I kept chiseling away parts of my tree
Yeah.
when I was doing it, and I was like, oh no. But
Yeah, but he's definitely like, if we zoom in on it even further here, I keep grabbing the screen share instead. I hope it's not making you guys seasick. But look at how the values are actually getting a little lighter as they approach the sky here and here.
mhm,
So there's a transition into the sky. It doesn't stay, it's not a sharp edge um, going into the sky. It's getting a little lighter, lighter. See this light edge
yeah,
transitioning? That's where the sky is eating around the shapes, where you're seeing the light literally bending and unfolding around like water going around a rock, and then coming a little bit in front of the rock before it keeps going. Um, so,
how does he do that?
well, when
Does he?
I don't particularly know his exact process, but I know for
Uh-huh.
myself, what I do is I might block in the main thing and then I will literally just paint that transition. Like I'll mix the note and paint it.
Okay.
He looks like he's in a lot of ways a fairly tonal painter. So he does a lot of beautiful color things, but like I know that if I was painting this would have been a blue transition. Absolutely. It would have been some kind of a color transition, whereas he's
Yeah.
essentially just doing a value transition here. So
Yeah.
he could easily have just literally taken the color of the sky and the color of this, mixed them together to find an in-between, and is painting that in. You can paint like the dark and then paint this lighter color over it while it's still wet, sort of letting it mix so you get a softer edge.
Yeah.
Or you can just literally mix it and then paint it. But I think that softer edge is a real thing. Like this is a fairly soft edge right here and even here,
Mhm.
right?
Right.
So it's very much like the bigger difference between your study and his painting is actually more edges. I might argue that it's the edges more than anything else. So if I
Yeah.
went in to your painting and blurred it, let's see, do I have where's the blur tool? Oh, here it is. Come on. If I just come in and start,
that is almost time.
oh my goodness, it's never enough time. I just never have enough time. But if I go in and just, it'll be easier if I just color pick it. And just even sawtooth the edges of these things. Then so that the edge is not as sharp, then it will, and that's something that does take a little bit of practice to control.
Okay.
It feels
Yeah.
like blurring something is somehow supposed to be easy, but then when you actually try to do it, you find that it's like an all or nothing proposition where you go, I either am like scrubbing it to death and it has no more shape intention, or I have a crystal clear, sharp edge. And it literally does take practice to control your edge without going crazy on it. And so you end up trying different things to see
Yeah.
how they work. Most of the time I have found that the answer is in having a lighter touch, holding my brush
Okay.
more lightly, floating the paint instead of laying the paint. Like that is usually the answer. Like dry brushing instead of having everything be wet. Those things. See, all I'm doing is coming in and just trying to rough up all these edges. And
Yeah.
softening and making them more tree-like. And that's
Okay.
also something, this could be like literally just a meditative exercise where without putting too much importance on it, you just kind of systematically go around and
Go back and do that. Yeah.
just like how there have been times when I have systematically gone around and made all of my forms convex. Like or systematically gone around and without feeling like the big time crunch, just go, okay, well, what if I just compare all of the things in this category to each other? And I sit there and I compare and I compare and I go, well, I guess that's a little, so that more of my time is spent standing there staring at it
Yeah.
and not so much time actually like pushing paint around. So, but there's like a weird feeling that if you're not actually pushing the paint, that you're somehow not doing enough. But really, the thinking part is really
Yeah.
is so important.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's
That
great.
makes sense.
Yeah,
Okay.
and this road, since we were just talking about perspective, you just need to like let this diminish more aggressively right here. See how that, so that goes
Yeah.
much smaller, just to like get comfortable really exaggerating that perspective language. Look at how that immediately just, now all of a sudden it really super reads,
Yeah.
back there. Okay.
Yeah.
So
Okay. Great.
Mary, I have you set up here, and this is the right thumbnail, right? Number 7.
Yes,
Okay. What a great scene. This feels so much like is this Annapolis?
this is our community marina.
What a gift. You got that like right down the street. That's awesome.
Yes,
This is like
we've got a lot of nice landscaping around the neighborhood, and I really spent 4 days just searching for a scene to use.
Oh,
And then
that's
I
great.
spent a lot of time looking.
Yes.
And those other, I told you to use number 7 because I did thumbnails of a variety of things in different settings. And when I went back and checked all my thumbnails, this was the winner.
Yeah. And that's exactly the process that I go through, where I'll do the same thing. I'll just spend days walking around with my sketchbook, finding the things. And then I write all these notes, about what time of day and what time of year. And I find it very helpful. And in some ways, like when you're just doing it that way, it's a little bit lower pressure, where you're just like, yeah, I'm scouting for spots. Like that part can be really fun. And when I go out with all my gear on my back and I'm like, I got to paint a painting today, sometimes then the stress of it is too much. But if I've already curated down to a thumbnail scene and I've got the design set up, so I can see you even have some nice perspective language happening here in your thumbnail, which is great. And
Yeah,
then
I like the zigzaggy.
yes, the zigzag, exactly.
It's
So
kind of fun. And then the roundness contrast of the plants and actually even the tree line.
that's right. Yeah. So you've got these like arching forms and then these zigzagging forms, and they're communicating with each other. You've done a really nice job with the sky and showing like that dome of the sky with how it gets lighter at the horizon like that. I really like that. I do think that in terms of perspective, because you've got a lot going for you here, especially these grasses, I think came out really well. All these grasses that you kind of put in the foreground, these might be a little bit light. They might have to go down a little bit in contrast to be more like these guys over here, or just have like a couple of like little moments, designed moments instead of so many of the lighter, but just like a few. See how just a few on there kind of say grass, whereas if you go too far, then it starts to jumble,
Yeah, I really struggled with a foreground and even the color of
in here.
It took me forever to mix, and I'm still not completely satisfied with the yellowish. Things were starting to turn color.
Yes, I know. Well, in the fall, man, yeah, the color
Yes.
is happening so fast. Well, really what happens when you get to these tufts of grass, one color is not going to tell you enough of the story. When they're really in silhouette, like over here, here, let me get so that you can see the cursor. When they're in silhouette, like you've got over here or down in here, you've done these very well and they've kind of in silhouette. But over here in this yellow clump,
Yeah.
then you do kind of have to have that band of like shadow, halftone, and lighter. And so if I,
That was the hardest part of the whole painting, that one section.
yeah.
I just went over and over and over, and I couldn't get it.
So I'm going to just go here and I'm going to go darker. I color picked your color, and I'm just going to give you a dark spot here. I'm actually like, I think you could straighten it out a little bit on this bottom edge. Because if you have that bottom edge undulate too much, you're saying that you're looking down at it. And so when you flatten it out, you're saying that it's closer to eye level. So the further up you go, the closer you get to eye level up here, the closer, the flatter the bottom of it needs to be.
Oh, that's a good tip. Well, I noticed in your lecture today, you're talking about the grasses.
Yes, and so
and how Van Gogh did, I think it was Van Gogh,
yeah,
did the lower of the darker, and that made it stand up.
Yeah, I know, right? It's kind of, see, but now these down here, I'm going to put some dark, but you know, with a lot of the undulations, and it still works, right? Because that's the part where you are looking down at it. But here, you're starting to get it to more eye level. So that's where you want all of your undulations can be up here, because you're seeing through the grasses, you know, through the tips of the grasses. Okay, so now when this is still not dark enough, so I'm going to color pick it to be even darker here for the shadow. So you've got like a shadow note here at the bottom. I'm kind of just examining it. It looks like the shadow is maybe a little bit stronger on this side. So anything as it's going down into the water is getting some of this treatment, this shadow treatment. Then we get a halftone. And so you acknowledge some kind of a halftone in between, and then you get that yellow. So it's like,
oh yeah, that's
one color alone never can quite give you the grass, you know?
I knew that, but I didn't know how to do what you're showing.
In the end, like when in doubt, I do those categories. I go, okay, what's the shadow? What's the halftone? What's the light? And then as a finishing touch, and only at the very end of the painting, do I go, are there some highlights? You know, and then I'm like, then I'll go in with, you know, a really lighter color, and I'll judiciously, you know, hit a few of them with a brighter, lighter color. Because you have to be very careful with highlights that you don't, if you go too far, then you've just lightened everything. You know, oh, right. Look at what I just did. I made that evenly spaced. There you go, that's better. Okay, so that should help you a lot when you do grasses. You actually did that over here. Like you were able to see it here where everything was in silhouette, where you've got like a dark, you've got a middle, and then you've got some lighter elements. But over here in the yellow, it just got complicated in your mind. And so, then you just have to, that's where you like revert to categories. And then over here with these arches, you really, I see in your thumbnail, you designing the arches, but now there's a lot of glare here, so it's a little bit tricky to see it. But here, you're doing exactly what I was talking about, like how I used to always give myself so much detail along the edge, but then I learned that I had to be careful how much variety I gave along the edge. So if we keep this amount of variety, then these guys over here need to smooth out, right? Because they're more distant.
Oh, those are too dark.
No, not too dark, too jagged.
Oh, okay.
And so so I've just made them in between. So this is super jagged, right? And then this is medium jagged, and then this is smoothed out because it's super far away. So you even could say that you have a further pattern of like, you know, crazy jagged for the grass, you know, and then mildly you know, then just straight up jagged for this, and then smoothing out, and then very smooth. So that there's just a consistent pattern, you know, going in a direction as you go to the distance. Bigger, little smaller, little smaller, little smaller, and then, you know, high color, more homogenized color, more homogenized color, more you know, high contrast, lower contrast, lower, lower, lower contrast. Like it's always has a consistent thread, jagged edges, medium jag, starting to smooth, smoother. Like it's, and you a little bit end up starting to have almost a checklist in your mind of, I do this when I'm working on a painting where it's like, okay, I get to it past the block in, and then I just start going through some checklists like, okay, do I need to flatten anything out? Here's my perspective. How have I organized it? And I sort of reorganize it, pushing everything into relationship. And then I start laying in details. But I do think that this could also kind of smooth out just a little bit more into.
Yeah, that's time.
Oh, is that time? Okay. Oh, and then just looking real quick at this line here becomes very important, and it's very tricky when you're on site to think in perspective here, but this is the that perspective angle. And so I'm usually like looking to give myself something that I can grab onto where I go, okay, that is my road, you know?
Well, I tried to echo the slight slope from back along the edge of the shore there, and then there's a little dark for the creek to the left of that bush in the middle. I don't know, I can't.
I'm not sure where you are, but
Okay.
basically, because this is getting up so close to the horizon line, it also needs to be flatter. So basically, especially once you get, the closer you get to the horizon line, the more foreshortened everything is. So now I'm just going to flatten that. And if something's coming in front, you let it come in front because it's interrupting and coming in front like this.
I don't understand the horizon thing.
The horizon line is like when you're looking at water and you have a distant landmass, the horizon line is.
I thought the only piece of
right there is
okay.
the distant
I thought
land.
the only piece of horizon visible was in the end of where the water empties into the.
Yeah, that's the horizon line. In this case, you can really see it because you can see that you are right here. That's your horizon line.
Right.
And so, but when you have a form that's meant to be further up there, the closer you are to the horizon line, here's like, you know, a square
It's
shape.
flatter.
And then, yeah, things get flatter and flatter until they're just
And
literally, you know, just a
never thought
line.
of that.
And then you start to see the underneath as you go up. But so I'm just kind of arguing that this form here needs to be flatter because it's
Okay.
right there, and then the angles can get more slanted as you get closer to yourself.
I'm not following you.
So it's like here are the topographical lines
Okay.
of the grid on the ground plane, right?
Oh, I know what you're saying.
Yeah. So then
Okay.
once you get to something that's living up here, it ends up kind of having to be more flattened.
I've got
And if
you
you've
now.
got something down here, it can sit on that tilt.
Okay.
Yeah.
I understand now.
Okay,
Thank
great.
you.
Ooh, I'm glad that you kept saying that you didn't understand though, because if you weren't understanding, it's likely that other people weren't as well. So it's important to get that clarity. Okay, so I am gonna move over. Now we did Sherry. So here is Sandy. This, I think, is such a joyful expression of the rhythms of a tree. Like, this made me so happy when I saw it. I was like, yes, look at that. Like, it, this looks like it was fun.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, that is, and I feel like when organizing foliage becomes fun instead of torture, it can definitely be a game changer, you know, to your experience of landscape. And then it opens up even different possibilities for maybe what you might want to paint. So, and
Yes.
yet, you know, there, you also have like kind of a clay-like quality while you're grappling with the concept. But I just love seeing these clay-like forms because it shows me that you guys are really like grappling with these concepts. Like you're really like stretching out of a comfort zone and you're like doing it, you know, which is the path to, you know, sort of a transformative experience. So, so also then with yours, although your photo seems like even more high contrast, but I am also kind of enjoying how you've got this color shift happening in the sky holes here. So it's all about like, when you want to move past this point, it's about controlling edges and deciding, you know, how to do those kinds of, how to texturize and how to do the smaller points of design coming out of here. I wanted to talk about the design down here, these trees here and these trees here, because this, I feel like you're grappling with it. The only thing that I think you could shift is like this spot right here is a chunk of foliage that's like floating in front. Do you see the spot that I'm talking about?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, and so then like what I'll do is I will literally like make the whole tree just like what you've got here. And then I might, you know, go in, I start messing with my edges and getting some texture things going on. And then I will float this and have it, oh, it didn't choose anything. Let me try again. There it goes. Oh, do I need to be in a different, here. Then I will float this piece on top and it is the interruption. So this is the layer sitting in front. This is too pale because I color picked it from the other thing. But you get a sense of where you carve like a big substantial form and then you can float other forms. Here, I'll steal from it. Then you can float other forms visually on top of it and have them interrupt your clay line, you know, here. Like you've got these beautiful rhythms, but now you kind of allow them to be interrupted by the patterns, but not completely obliterated. So the line is still there in a peekaboo sense. Okay, so there's that. And then, so I was going to talk about these trees down here. So these trees look like they were possibly planted ornamentally so that they were planted in a row. And so this is like absolutely a moment for designing based on the negative shapes. And so where you go in and try to see what the main pattern of negative shapes is going to be and go with that design idea. And then when you're painting, so see, I just filled them in with yellow. That I'm not saying to make them yellow, but where you go in and then when you're painting the negative shape, you can like push this paint around to help adjust the design of it. That whole like push and pull feature, and then where you kind of group, so to not exactly copy the exact design of the trees as they are in their rows, but to see how I'm going to take the environment and push into the shape. This is what I would do with the paint, you know, make my adjustments back and forth between the environment, between the negative shape and the shape of the tree. And as I get closer to the edge of the painting, I get more interested in lowering the contrast because I want to quiet contrast as I'm approaching my edges. As just a general sort of design thing, I'm looking for opportunities to quiet the edges, and to quiet contrast or to interrupt a strong line. Like here we have this really strong line here. So I would be looking for some way to interrupt that line, so that it doesn't pull the viewer out. See how I just am kind of softening that in here to try to help keep the viewer interested in here. Does that make sense?
Yes, I see that.
That same token for like this line here, as the shadow is like approaching, I would, oops, that's not a good color. Try this. Well, actually it would be more like this, where I would start softening the edge of that shadow really intentionally, as it approaches the edge, in order to help it keep the viewer inside. And this flip,
So is that like a transition?
yeah, it's like a transition. Like there's a thing that happens with shadows where as they go away from their origin, they start to blur a little bit. And then you get I think it's called the penumbra.
Yes.
You know,
Right.
it's like a half shadow that starts to happen, where the light is able to leak around. And so I've also heard of a thing called flashing, which is more about like where a shadow is very bright contrast, where there's like all of a sudden you see like a sharp color hit that happens. But then as you get further away, it's actually the penumbra happening. It's not letting me move oops. I don't know why. There you go. Then it's the penumbra, and the penumbra is not necessarily the same color as like a flashing moment. Over here, it's usually, in my mind, the penumbra is a little bit more of like a grayed out, because it's like whatever color the shadow is also then influencing. Can I make it happen here? It would, in my mind, the shadow would also be getting a little bit bluer and purplery. What word am I even trying to say? Like it's going to get that sky color influence once it gets out here. I expect to start seeing more cool notes in influencing the color of the shadow, and then that cool note will blend in here and give like a weird gray. But then at this high contrast point up here, you end up with just like a sharper edge that might have like an intense color flashing off of it.
So when you say flashing, I'm a little confused.
Yeah.
Is it by the tree trunk, the closer, like the sharper edge, like a cast shadow?
Yeah, it's right by the cast shadow. Here, let me show you an example. Can you spotlight my phone? Oh, we have to stop the share. Here, I'll stop the share. I've got this painting right here on my wall where I was really examining those concepts.
Abigail, can you turn on the video on your phone?
Yeah, I don't know why it's not start video. There you go. Thank you. So, okay, can you see this painting here? This is a big still life. And okay. I've got, you know, really strong, high, you know, contrast cast shadows coming out onto this table. But at the edges of the shadows, the color is intensifying right there and there.
Mm-hmm.
But
yes.
but I was observing them, so I was seeing them as different. I was observing how they might be different colors as they occur, because I was, you know, doing the color thing here. So interesting because, and then here along on the edge where it's like a dark contrast, and then this is called a halation, where the light thing is almost heat waving up into the dark and giving this glow. That's usually yellow when you see it come off of a lemon. Here's another halation right here. See, there's like warm coming off of there and cool coming off. I was like super studying it. And then here's one. And then there's this. So there's a pattern that I have definitely noticed where in moments of really high contrast, and they're called different things. It will be called flashing when it's on the edge of a cast shadow against the light. It's called halation when it's a light thing going up in front of a dark environment. And then it's called neon color spreading when it's an optical illusion and you just see colors leaking optically wherever you have a light field going up against a dark field. So it starts to really feel like a pattern, right? Like, you know, where whenever there's contrast, high contrast, color seems to prism, I call it prisming out. And it'll prism out and show an intense, it'll throw an intense color. I don't know how else to describe it, but it's interesting as a color phenomenon that it happens in all these different points, and we have names for all the different ones. And you see it, but I've definitely,
What was the name? You said flashing, and then the second one was salation, elation?
Oh, halation.
Oh, halation.
Yeah, a halation.
And then neocolor.
And then the neon color spreading, and they all kind of are doing something very similar, you know, and yet they're all from different scenarios.
Yes. Can you do a workshop on that?
I know, right?
I love that.
Just on that. Like, I am talking about color next week, but I have to pick and choose like how deep a dive I go in any one thing. But I will say that this particular effect where the color kind of throws a color and prisms out like that, that's one of my favorite things to examine. And I've played with it a lot. I was taught to observe it tightly and with a great deal of like honesty. Like, you don't paint, if you can't see it, you don't paint it, you know, and when you do see it, you pick a color, you know, and the color can't be the same all the way along. So like, I really honed my vision for it, and then discovered that other painters were just doing it without seeing it because they just knew it was cool. And then I discovered that there are optical illusions around it. And I mean, it's like very curious. I feel like I need to like interview a physicist and be like, is there something where all of this is coming together based on a certain principle of, you know, like, it feels like they've got to tie together somehow, but I haven't found the connection yet.
Thank you. That was great.
No, good. Okay, so let's see. I'm looking at Patricia. Oh, I think you did send me a better picture and I didn't. Did you send me a better picture? And did I somehow not get it in here? I remember looking at the better picture.
Yeah, I sent it a third email.
What'd you say?
I cleaned off my camera and sent another email.
I know, I remember seeing it and somehow I missed getting it in there. Hold on a second. Let me just look you up in my email real quick and grab it. Less blurry. Ta-da! There it is. Okay. Select all, copy. There it is. Okay.
I'm looking at trees a whole different way now. I can't stop staring at them.
Yay! That's what I like to hear. It's like that when you study the figure too, only like it's a little bit more dangerous when you study the figure because you start staring at people like, and you become the creeper who's like staring at people on the bus. And yeah, it's really, It is fun. This is, well, it's funny because now that it's like high, now that it's really in focus, it has all the glare on it, which is the whole other issue of like taking photographs of paintings. But this is a really great little tree line that you found. I could see a zillion paintings coming out of this reference, like, or this spot. Is that near your house?
It
Is
is.
that-
Yeah. And there were other trees. I had a hard time picking which one to do. There were some really cool trees there.
Yeah, really very fun. And so I like the foreground shapes that you've got in here because they're doing a nice job sort of setting the scene, you know, as it builds in. That's definitely the kind of thing where, let me find the photo. Wait, which is the one reference? So like these shapes here of the shapes of the shadow versus the dappled light, and then choosing which ones and having them kind of get wider and then narrower is like really great, like foreground setup. And then also you can do that thing where you just pick you pick these little grass moments here. And this is like this is a real perspective language kind of thing. In my mind, it's perspective language. But so you see how this grass here comes up and interrupts the shadow that's behind.
Mhm.
And then this light grass here comes up and interrupts the shadow behind, but this grass is much shorter than that grass, right? So when you come over and you're doing your study, you can even, with the edge of your palette knife, like with the tip of your knife, you can scratch in some quick little like foreground, like you start from inside the light and you scratch a couple of foreground grasses, you know, more poetically than what I just did right there. And then you proceed to give the next one and you intentionally make them shorter, and whammo, you've got perspective foreground, you know, rocking the scene. And then you don't do that, you know, as they go further back here, and that confirms it yet again, like, oh, now they're so small that we don't see it. It's such a quick little notation of perspective whenever you have dappled light like this that I'm a real big fan of it. Like, because a lot of times I have struggled with my foregrounds, like being boring and not supporting the main idea enough. Whereas like this, look at this chunk right here. I love the way you painted this. That's really nice. That's got some nice variety. Can you see where I'm pointing? You've got some nice variety of mark making. I see like the shadow and then this, and then all you would really need is at the end of it would be to, here, I'm gonna color pick it. And I'm gonna just blue it a little bit. How do I blue it? I don't know how to make it the perfect in between. Maybe I just have to like pull it from here. There you go. So it's like I'm looking for something that I can use to give myself in this spot that you've already painted so nicely, and to give myself this chunk of foliage here. I'm going to give a little highlight moment here that starts on the inside and ends here at the sky hole. And it's going to give that dovetailing form.
Oh,
Right
okay.
here, I start on the inside and I pull it out. I'm not even doing it as like as a long, you know, smooth line. I'm just dotting it in. But the idea is that I'm just picking something and letting it start on the inside but end on the outside in order to put things in front of other things and push other things behind.
Okay.
Because you're just completely set up to do that right there. And then when you get all the way up here, you do have them smaller, but I would go even smaller here.
Okay.
for these branches, like really squeeze them out, and don't let them be don't let them be the same color as the branches down here. Once they're up high like this, they have to start turning bluer. Here, there's a blue. Ooh, that's too dark though, so so then I get up in here and I have like a slightly bluer version of the trunk. I could even give myself a little. If I give myself a triangle of blue here, and then I put a sky hole, a subtle sky hole there, it will look like a spray of thin branches that the light has eaten around, and it will help to transition. This gets to be really fun, like learning how to design, and like it takes a lot of energy to do those design things. And when you're in the field, you feel like there's no time to spare. Like I'm mixing the paint. I'm just trying to get the board covered, you know.
I
But
know.
this is,
I was just gonna say, at first I couldn't figure out how to do 3 designs off the same thing. And then after I painted this, I started seeing, oh my gosh, I could do it this way or that way.
Right, that's right. So it's like once you get into that creative mode, your brain starts to fire off ideas. Yeah, it's really great. So one of the things that I will do plein air is I'll do like what you have here, where I like lay down like the big idea of like where the trunks are. And when the light key is done, but I'm still there, I can then go into this area and start doing that thing where I do the push pull, where I go, okay, so I just need to make this branch thinner. And I'm gonna have, and I decide, let's see, oh, here, I'll look at the reference. Let's see if the reference will help me. Okay, so I'm looking for my leading trunk line here for this high point. So I'm gonna take this trunk, I'm following it up. What's the high point of this cluster? I don't know. Let me try this one. Oh yeah, that seems to be it. So I'm kind of choosing to follow to the high point, even if it's not like super apparent. I'm giving myself some kind of midline structure to follow. And so then over here, I can take that idea of how those two kind of came together, and then that one went away. So let's see, I'll do this one, I'll bring up. And so now I'm not operating as like a copying the reference. I'm just working within the design of the painting that's here. And I'm pulling the trunk thread up. I'm doing this as like a mechanical line right now. Let's see. Oh yeah, here you go. There's right on the side of a sky hole. And so I kind of choose the main stem line, and then I will interrupt it with foliage. And so what I'm looking for is a peekaboo of the main trunk to occur that has a secretly consistent rhythm inside of it.
Okay.
You see what I'm doing? This is a little bit like procedure. So you've got everything in, and now you're trying to like do whatever tweaks you can do while you're still in the field. The light is gone, but you're there, and the paint is fresh, and you've got everything, all the colors are mixed up. So, and very often the trunk line comes up like this, and there's very often sky holes that butt up against that trunk line, you know? And then anywhere where it's goes into shadow, you know, it might just disappear with it. So you just end up seeing a couple of instances where this comes into view.
Abigail, that's time.
Is that time? Okay. Where it comes into view. And then, so what you're looking for is just some peekaboo moments for the main stem of the trunk. This one is the one that's really working because you already had this, and it feels like these could be coming from there, right? So there's this like long line of continuity. Or I'll come in and I'll like break up a spot like that and turn it into a split trunk. Anyway, it's so much fun. I'm excited for you. I see some nice like sweeping shapes in here too. Yeah, landscape painting is really fun, especially when the weather is with you and you're in the field, and things can get really magical. Like, all right, so we're gonna talk about
Thank
cat.
you.
Huh?
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Okay, so Kathy, I love that you have your thumbnails and then you went over it. Is that like a pink highlighter?
Yes, I felt like I had too many lines, so I was trying to pick the main ones.
That's pretty cool because it's like you're literally creating your own shorthand in your sketchbook of like, okay, here I'm going to just go for everything that I see. Now I'm going to, with this other color, I'm going to mark the main rhythms that I want to follow, right?
Yes.
So I look at that and I'm like, oh, I see a series. Like, I'm like, I could see you going into the landscape, doing a million of these studies where you do like these kinds of undulating rhythms and these muscular forms, like the way that foliage sometimes falls into muscle shapes like that, and dovetails in, and then you go over it with this like pink, and it's like a whole, like, I don't know, it kind of reminds me of like how Wolf Kahn took the like an essence of the landscape as he saw it, came up with his own shorthand, and then just played with it, like threw crazy colors in, you know, really went after the design. But now, is this the one, your favorite one too? The one that you did the pink on?
Yeah, you can sort of see that one's a square one. So, and I had enlarged it. At first I was just going, you know, 4x3 or whatever. But as I drew it, I was like, no, this has got to be square.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, I like it. I like a square format too. And so, and you've got the beginnings of like doing the dome of the sky here as well. But once you get up into these corners, I would take it to like the next level of darkness. And the upper reaches of the sky are, they almost get to be like a purpley blue. It really, it can get very rich, and you can get away with a much darker sky than you think up in these corners here. And so if I just hit the corners with it, and then I'm going to transition going the other way to soften it. It will create that feeling of the dome of the sky.
Okay.
So you're looking for it to not just go side to side. I'm exaggerating it here, but I know I wish I had like another transition color. I find that I can really study the shifts in the sky. It can almost be its own study, just studying the transitions of color and value in the sky. And then on the edges of the paintings, this might be one of the best trees I've seen you paint. Because I've seen a lot of your tree paintings, and they have a tendency to fall into these very tight edged, like very rigidly cut out edged shapes. But I feel like I'm seeing now like a slight loosening of that, you know, where this is gotten a little bit softer. You can even do this, what I'm doing right now, where like you let the sky get a little bluer as it approaches, but this is some nice edge work that you're starting to do in here, which is really great. I love to see it. And I feel like this foliage here is in front of that foliage, you know, which is starting to give you that language of perspective that's so exciting. I also think that your tree trunks, as they go up here, they need to get bluer, you know, like start getting They get blued a little bit by being, you know, up and further away. These are kind of working though, because they're darker. Maybe I'll just blue them, you know, there, but see how that makes them feel farther away from the ground plane, like just by letting the blue of the sky come up around it a little bit more. And I would make them a little thinner. Oh, this is not going to be the tool for that.
Okay.
Let me make it. So yeah, make them even thinner by cutting in with the environment going around them. That's my favorite trick for thinning a branch. Like I put the branch in, it always goes down too thick, and then I have to thin it. Like that just seems to be the process. Like maybe some people are so good that they can just put that perfect thin line down. But I feel like every time I'm going for that perfect thin line, like a dog comes and bites my ankle, or the wind blows, or something happens, and it's like, you know, like it just every time, man. And you did a nice job too of arranging your sky holes into these patterns, and then seeing the branches, you know, coming out of the sky holes. I think it's working really nicely. But I would say that you could do, like, one of the things that I talked about today was like smoothing these elements and letting them undulate a little bit less near the top, and letting these shapes down here undulate a little bit more. And then I've become a fan also of doing a thing where I'll have the tree throw some leaves off the bottom, you know, just the way, and then you can have them throw leaves off the top, but they have to be substantially smaller and bluer. So the leaves that get thrown from the top just need to confirm perspective language, and the leaves that get thrown from the main mass at the bottom as a softening, they can you know, be larger, or you can paint them as larger chunks, and then another leaf hangs off of that chunk. But it's just like the next step in the texturizing. Oh, and then also these up here, I didn't talk about this in class. I just ran out of time to put it in the slides, but there's a thing when you're looking at the foliage, right? Where you're here and you're seeing the foliage, but as you go up looking at the foliage, you're seeing more and more underneath the foliage. So you'll end up seeing the underside of the foliage here more. So you see more of the undersides of things the higher up you go into the tree. And then further down the tree, you see less of the undersides, just like you have it here. Does that make sense? So here you start to see more, and then here even more. And you end up seeing a lot of this tree is starting to fall into a familiar pattern where trees do this thing where they look like broccoli. And then they have this kind of a shape. And then this all is in shadow. And then the top part of the broccoli is the part getting light. And then you have a halftone transition. Trying to think of his name. Ken Backus does that really effectively in his work, where you can really see that broccoli mushroom shape, especially in his slightly more distant trees. You can see him using it quite a lot. Sarah, will you put a note? I want to look up, I forgot to include him in any of the slideshows, and he is someone that I thought would be good to point to. I feel like this is a little bit of an opportunity for me to also like just point out artists that I think are doing really good work to people and have those people get attention. You know?
What was his name again?
Ken Backus.
Okay.
Yeah, because I think and there's never enough time, right? But he does really nice organization of his tree foliage shapes into these sort of mushroom broccoli things. Okay. Oh, and then here, let's look in the tree trunk here. So this tree trunk is set up really nicely. I love your like taper out into the landscape, and it just needs a line going cross contour,
Uh,
right? Just a few, and it will round itself out a little bit more. Here, I look at how quickly things become evenly spaced. Like I literally feel like unless I'm actively thinking about it, I will always make things evenly spaced, like every time. And then you can also do a thing where you let the tree cast a shadow onto the trunk. I don't think I've talked about that either, but that can be done. And then let the shadow even undulate onto the trunk and confirm the roundness of the trunk. Yeah, this is great. It's kind of exciting. I feel like this is going to be the beginning of a new era for you in your foliage forms. Up here is another good moment where you can kind of like let the shape separate, where you end up taking a chunk, and then after you've got your masses in, you throw a couple of isolated leaves off of the mass. See what that does?
mhm.
And it and you don't have to go crazy with it. Like Clyde Askbevig in that one with all the yellow trees, he's like going crazy for it. Like he's got so much texture. He clearly is really going after that. Look at all the tiny leaves kind of look. So, but you don't have to have all those tiny leaves, but if you just have a few to soften the solidity of the modeling, it can make a big difference. Okay.
So I have a couple of questions.
Yes.
In the foreground tree, I feel like I should have more darks
Mm-hmm.
to model it better. Would you think that's true?
In the foreground tree, like you mean in this foliage here, have more
in
dark
there. Yeah.
in here? Yeah, no, I mean, you can have more darks. I was reading these trees as like more side by side, but just this foliage is more in front.
Yeah, that's basically what they are.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, you could definitely
Abigail
do
and
more
Kathy, that's
darks.
time.
Oh, is that time? You could do more darks here. I don't know if you really need. Yes, you could. Well, what you could do is have like chunkier molding of form, like where you have more of a shift of the halftone
Right.
as like
Okay.
a bigger jump to it. Kind of like what I was doing in Mary's grass, where she just needed the 3 transitions. And
Right.
so here you've got your big foliage chunk, and then it's like, but what is the halftone color versus the shadow color versus the main light color? And so you can literally have like, okay, well, here's my big main form. I'm going to model my big main form, you know, with shadow, halftone, and light. And then you can even have subforms, you know, like here might be a subform and you model it a little bit separately. And then at the very end, you know, you go in with, you know, a couple of judicious highlights. And you can even sort of pick, like if the light is coming from here, this is going to be my main like highlight moment, and then all my other highlights will be a little bit less dynamic. And then the same up here, if you're going to have this get hit with a highlight, you kind of do the same thing, like where will the main, maybe the main highlight gets to be here, and no other highlights get to be as exciting as that one. But it's kind of fun. You can actually start to see the modeling language start to show up just with the categorization of like, this is the shadow, halftone, light. Now I'm going to hit some specular highlights. I think it was Corot who was one of the first ones to really start putting specular highlights into his foliage, and they called it Corot's snow, because he was doing it like kind of for the first, and people weren't really accustomed to putting the shine, you know, on things. And he was so enamored of it that he would put these sort of big white, you know, he would scumble them over, and they were a little bit excessive, I think. I mean, who am I to criticize Corot? But the one that I saw when I was reading the museum tag and it was talking about Corot's snow, I was like, oh yeah, that is, I can see why they were making a little bit of fun of him, calling it Corot snow. But he was revolutionary. You know what I mean? Like here he was actually like noting a visual experience that no one else was painting that was true. So
Could you just say something about that foreground shadow that's coming from behind me as I'm painting?
the one coming from behind,
One.
the dark
Yeah.
foreground shadow here.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I like it as a foreground shadow, but I do feel like because it has a sharp edge to it all along here, I didn't think it was coming from behind you. I figured it was coming from the side. Because
Well,
I'm
it sort
looking,
of is. Yeah.
I'm looking for that moment that tells me where it is this like, because when the shadow well here I need a different color. When the shadow is coming from the object like this direction, it'll be sharp and dark right here, and then it starts to soften and get bluer out here. Like that's sort of standard shadow language, right? So I'm like looking as I look along the edge of it, is it all going to get bluer along this edge because it's coming from behind, or is it getting bluer in this direction because the shadow's going from there? But it doesn't seem like it would be because it looked like the shadows are on this side. So that would mean that this is where it would be catching its shadows.
That's where it would be further, I guess, but
Yeah,
it's
wherever
so
it's getting
to where I'm
further
standing.
away from its origin, that's where it would start getting its blue influence.
So I should probably exaggerate that, even if I'm not seeing it.
Exactly.
Okay.
If you don't see it, then you put it, and you could put it in subtly. Look, here, I'll be more subtle. You can put it in more subtly. You can also do a thing, this would actually make a big difference, I think. So you've got the idea that the shadow has to undulate over the form of a landscape, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, which is great. But if you start thinking about the grid lines, you know, of doing the topography of the landscape. Now, hold on, I'm going to back out of a bunch of the stuff that I've done because it'll start getting too confusing. Okay, so here is the high point. Here is a lower point, a lower point. And then the land goes like this. So I see how I'm making my grid of what the land is doing. Therefore, anything that's on this angle right here is facing towards the light, more towards the light. So those things I'm going to say get to be a little bit lighter because they're facing towards the light. This is also facing towards the light. Anything on the uphill going in, you know, facing the light gets to go a little bit lighter.
Okay. All right.
And then what you can already immediately see what it does, right? Then anything on the other side facing a little bit away from the light is going to get a little bit darker once we get to the other side of the hill. But then we have to confirm it with what's happening in the shadow. This is where it really gets good. When you've done it once, right? And then you decide to confirm it. So now the shadow, anything in the shadow that's on the uphill is lighter and maybe getting more sky. Lighter and getting more sky. Lighter and getting more sky. And everything on the other side is getting darker. So that I now have a pattern of the topography. I'm literally modeling the topography of the land as it goes from the light into the shade in these minor undulations. you see how by confirming it, now the landscape really looks like it's starting to ripple.
Oh yeah, it looks great.
So,
Thank you.
and then here, like this dirt road, you have another opportunity to confirm by letting the road also do it.
Mhm.
I mean, this is the juicy stuff, you know what I mean? Where it's like, you're like actually carving the land, you're modeling like drapery, the landscape. Okay. Now,
Thank you.
yeah. Was that our last one? No, Barbara. Oh yeah, Barbara,
Yes, we have one more, Barbara.
You have a
Okay,
really beautiful tree. Look at this beautiful tree she painted. I mean, that's really nice. And I like how you printed the reference and then you just found your rhythms with a marker right on it, like doing the tracing. And then you were like, and it's fun, isn't it? You realize that there's like a zillion ways you could organize the same tree.
Right.
And I see you doing this thing in your, here, let me get the cursor so you can see it. Here, where it does feel like you've got this form kind of coming in front of that one. Like I feel like there's this one, that one comes a little in front, a little in front, a little in front. Like I see that starting to form. I feel like you could do it a little bit more or adjust the scale and like design the shapes a little bit to have a little bit more variety so that you've got this shape, like if this one, like, so I want there to be like oh, hold on, I'm not in the right layer painting. Okay. There it is. So it's like if this one, oh, I don't have the opacity up anymore because I was trying to be subtle. Okay. So if you make one get a little bit bigger, see, I'm making it bigger just to have a little bit more of like a dominant, you do have a big dominant arc here, like I do see that. But then as you cascade down into the details, you want to continue to try to see variety in the shapes. If it becomes too regular, then it does start to have like a topiary kind of feel to it. So see how that just kind of naturalized the rhythms by just introducing a little bit of a hierarchy to the sizes of the to the foliage chunks. But you have a really great way of laying down the paint with these brush strokes that feel soft, but you know, like they hold their quality of being a brush stroke without you know, being overly sharp in their edges. I do really like that. I also think that down here in the trunk, it would be, you want to pick the dominant branch. So let me look at your reference. Wow, I have to like super zoom in to see this trunk. Oh, is that someone picking up? For just a minute, I thought it was going to be a horse.
Oh, you're right. I didn't see that.
I know. And then I was like, I thought it was going to be a horse. And then I'm like, nope, that's someone picking up trash. Huh? Okay. Hold on, guys. I have a family crisis of piano lesson needs here. Hold on a second. I have to text the link to the piano lessons to my kids so that they can get started. So you guys are just going to get the gift of seeing my email real quick. I gotta just find here. Duration, copy. If I can just get Max set up. You're really, guys, getting a little peek into my life here. Okay, now we can get back to it. I just sent Max's link Okay, so here's our tree. It actually has a kind of a cool shape. I think that this is the dominant branch. Let me look.
Mhm.
I think that's the dominant stem line, like is going to be this one, and then this is the subform. I think her presence actually clusters with this and makes it seem like maybe this one could be it, but you do want to pick one. So if I over here and I take this and I just thicken it so that it becomes the main line, and then thickening this to become the main line. And then I like to do a thing where, like, without even necessarily changing, because I think you can definitely do this. You're already kind of doing it. I don't even have to change the color that much, but to even just have the brush stroke, I can mimic the brush stroke actually. Come on. Oops. That was weird. It was asking me to share again. And I have the brushstroke come from inside the trunk and then go outside so that this secondary the secondary branch feels like it's coming not just from the side, but from the, I'll put a little bit of light on it. So when the light comes from the inside to the outside, that really confirms it.
Oh yes, I see what you're doing.
See how I'm like, and it really does, this is the kind of thing it requires like conscious decision. So it's very subtle, but I just said, okay, this is my main sort of trunk. And now this is my secondary one. And I'm looking to find some way of expressing volume. You already have some very nice volume things happening in the main thing, but so I'm just doing like a little enhancement here. And then the same a little bit with now this is a classic example of the camera is giving us like nothing, right? Look at this shadow. It's pitch black. Like there is no way that shadow in real life, was pitch black like that. Although you can see that the camera is catching how the grass is like darkening as it approaches the shadow, right? Isn't that interesting? Here, you can really see it in this little aperture in the dappled light. But so when you're doing this cast shadow, that's your moment to know more than the camera was telling you. And so you can go in and put these shadows in, actually, because you put it in and you kind of have that ground, the brown from your tone was there, but it could read as dirt. And so if you wanted it to be dirt, is there anything I can grab that has some purple in it? Let me try that. No, let me try that. No, there's no purple anywhere. This is like the beginnings of it. That's probably the closest thing I'm gonna get. Well, maybe I'll just have to, I was gonna show you, if you want to, you can mimic, this is like the grass, because you've got the grass set up, the light on the grass and the shadow of the grass. And then if you just make this a purple, then that brown would read as the light on dirt. And then if you make it like have a purple or more brown lean, then you would get that quality of, light, getting to see the crossing rhythms of, seeing something in light and shade, and then seeing something else go also from light to shade. And then you can do, ooh, this is really, and then you go into a little detail moment. Now I'm really having fun. Where I go, and then there are a few blades of grass that are going to interrupt right there. And then over here in the back, you would get these dark bits of grass that would come up, but they have to stay shorter than whatever these are to mimic perspective. So much fun, right? Like, and it's all just these tools that we get to play off of. Like, we use our inspiration, but then you have these tools that you can manipulate for design and all of that kind of stuff. And then when you want to, if you want to go like really into, you can, talking about like those halations and everything, you can have the tree do these halations going up into this dark mass that it's in front of, and actually have it feel like it's smoking into the environment. And it will give it like a zzz kind of glow quality when you do that. I just made it orange, but it could also be purple or blue, depending on, you know, your own inclination. Or if you're there and you see it, then you can, you know, just pick the color that you see. So, okay. Yeah, and then I don't know, I mean, this is so nice, I almost hesitate to criticize it, but I do think that your halftones could be just a tiny bit, you could just get a little bit more volume with just slightly thicker halftones in here.
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah. Right.
I mean, I'm kind of nitpicking though, because it's a pretty nice tree in its own
No,
right.
I'm glad you are. That's how I'm learning.
Yeah. It's yeah, and then this halftone would end up getting interrupted by this form being in front. This is a pretty cool little horseshoe shape that's happening here.
You know, the tree had so many scallop looking shapes that I wanted to really join them, but I kept to the original design.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see what you're saying. And it's kind of cool because you do, as you paint trees and you like really get into it, you do start to go, oh, wow, look, this tree wants to fall into these, you know, scallop shapes. Another tree does fans. Another tree is like made out of a lot of ball shapes, or the willow that's made out of these long drippy lines. And getting really into finding the shape language of a tree, not just the variety of the tree, but the individual tree, you know, so that you're almost doing like a portrait of a tree, and getting the likeness of it can really be fun. I do think you could benefit from doing a bit of these like little finishing, here, maybe I'll kick up this opacity. Ooh, I instead made the opacity way less. Let me try it again. Okay. Where you throw a couple of little dots and you don't worry about them being attached. Like you let them float in the air above the tree, because you can't see the attachment because the light is eating around it.
So wait, can you repeat that again, that concept?
Well, what you do is you take, like, you've got your foliage chunk, right? But then at the end, you're looking to kind of have like those little finishing moments, like the little filigree. Like when you're at the end of a painting, you're going after like the little details that are then going to balance from the big thick masses.
Right.
And so at the end of a tree, then I'll go in and I'll pick out a couple of floater leaves that are hanging out, but I don't worry about attaching them with stems or making sure that they attach, because I know that when a leaf is that little and you can't see the stem attaching it because the light eats around the stem.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, so it's actually, and it gives, it helps the tree to feel airy, you know,
Right,
to have a couple of those moments. I would put it over here, but I'm hesitant because of how close we are to the edge, and I don't want to attract too much attention, you know, as we're so close to the edge. But you can see how you could add one there, but I I would go back and forth about that one, just
Right.
because of this edge here. Yeah, I'm just kind of debating if that is a benefit or not. And then, yeah, so then these feel a tiny bit regular as well. So it's like I want to pick,
Right. They
I want
are.
to pick one, two, and it shouldn't be the one like right on top of that one. So maybe these two, I could have them kind of ride together a little bit more
Right.
to create that smoothness of, you know, the stuff that's a little bit further away, or really it's more just a design moment of trying to make sure that I don't have too many regular shapes.
Exactly. It needed that desperately.
Yeah, that actually, that kind of doing it here and here, that really took it there. Like,
Right.
and it's funny because as I'm painting, and you've seen me do it even right now as I'm doing the critiques, it's like, you know, you'll really feel like you're getting that variety, and then you like back up and look at it and go, oh my goodness, how did I manage to make all these shapes exact? Or you end up making a variety of shapes, but they all have the exact same negative space between them.
Yeah.
Like, it just takes so much intention to avoid that and develop that language. Here, then I'm probably like thinking I could subdivide this branch like this. So I've got two uneven shapes. Like you've already done it here really nicely. So I'm going to do it up there in secret, and and see. These are all just little finishing touches. You're very close to showing that mushroom broccoli shape that I was talking about that Ken Backus is so good at. Where he gets this
Underneath.
yeah, the underneath, you know, where it's almost like it's all the trees are made out of these little umbrellas. So all I have to do, once I have that shape idea in my mind, it's often little tiny adjustments to confirm it, and then bam, it's there, like it shows up. But the idea has to be in your mind for to get it to happen. I bet you could, even though I know it's not in reality here, for the sake of it, just as a painting, I think it would be nice if you allowed the sky to peekaboo.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. The tree is so solid.
Yeah, because I mean, and I see what you were dealing with, although, I mean, you could take these lighter areas and put them in here as a transition, but I get why you wanted these darks, you know, all up against the light, because it's giving you that really good contrast. So I think it's, yeah, I'm all about, like, once you've taken what you needed, then yeah, go ahead and, yeah, I think it kind of adds to the air. I'll also do things like, I'll pretend, even though this is the beginning of a wall, I'll pretend that there's like a hole here, and the sky hole is an arrow pointing, see how I'm making it a triangle?
Oh, yeah.
And then this transition here just has to be adjusted by being a little bit bluer or lighter, or so I can go in here and just soften this a little bit. And then I'll soften this that's going right up against it, against the sky
Abigail,
hole.
I just want to let you know it's
Oh, is that?
4:48.
Oh, okay, thank you. So yeah, like sky holes, like, and where you place them, you can use them to help point the eye.
That's a great point. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Well, this is really fun. You guys are doing such great work with these assignments. It's really inspiring me. I'm wanting to get out into the landscape too, because it's like I don't know where you are, but we're starting to get the real turn of the fall foliage. It's really pretty. So, all right. So, well done, everyone. I guess I'll see you next week, and then we'll be done. year.
Yeah.
Yay.
Until the next time.
Until
Yeah,
the next
thank you,
time.
Abigail.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks
Thank
a
you.
lot.
Okay,
Thanks,
That's
everyone.
great.
See you next
okay.
week. Bye.